They could, and they probably will, but again, getting that consistently, getting that message out there, that. Yeah, I'm going to try and talk around the subject, but yeah, I guess it would be just greenwashing for a lot of people.
Well, I mean, it just depends. So our guard against that is the Shaping Better Places framework. So because what we, by layering Shaping Better Places, which says people, place, and wildlife, the natural world, are intrinsically linked, and when we install these verticals, they have the option to connect to the communities in which they've been put. That we can do that. It's the next step on, and increasingly what we're seeing with the advent of biodiversity net gain, which is going to be mandatory next year, we're already seeing when a developer comes to us because they've got to do some work on sea defences, and they've been told by the Environment Agency, that they need to put some verticals in or whatever, or it's been written into the scheme. They're doing it as because someone's told them they have to. But if we can see the tender document, how they've been written in. First thing to check is they've been put in the right place. They're put in a place where they are actually going to function, because the developer will just shove them up, because they've been told to. So the first thing for us to check is, right, are they in the intertidal zone? Because they won't much if they're not. And the second thing is that if we can see the tender document, we might be able to see that there is a need for whoever got the contract to do something for community engagement. Increasingly, we're seeing that written into tender documents. It will say, that there is a requirement for public engagement or community engagement. And of course,
is that still part of the? Is that it's? Are we getting into the realms of a 106 agreement? Is that what we're getting into?
Well, no, potentially, yes. If there's Section 106 money associated with something, then that will be ring-fenced for community engagement work, and that's usually done by a third party. But I have seen in tender documents for civil engineering work requirements for public engagement. Now, when the developer receives that or goes for that project, they won't have a clue how or where they're going to do that. And so what I'm very quick to try and say to folks is, if you install a vertical, first of all, we make sure we get in the right place, but do you know that we have a team here who can connect that vertical to the local primary school or the local university or the local club, the scouts or the guides or whoever it is, the WA. So, the WI, not the WA. I don't know who the WA are. But anyway, so, and we can legitimately do that because of our history of working in that kind of stuff, but also it's designed in the first place. When we've got that blank piece of paper or the CAD screen and we're designing a thing, or I'm on the bench, I'm thinking, how is this thing going to connect to people as well as wildlife? And you can do it, and it's easy for us because that was part of the plan.
And I suppose part of, correct me if I'm wrong though, part of the joy that you may be just ticking the box for the developer, you need to do some community engagement, but for you guys that you derive a lot of your your personal sort of joy from
it's
just
purpose driven, isn't it? Yeah. And until we live in a world where most businesses are purpose driven, we have to make do with the fact that environmental social governance, ESG, is what it is, and we can use it to get some more work out there and try and influence the minds of folks that are working with ESG, and where we have worked with them. I mean, they're young people, these people working they're not sort of old men in suits. They're young people in their 20s that are working in these, asset management companies and the like. And they have become sort of insulated from the problems of the world. They know about them, but it's almost too much, I think, for them to think about, because it's too difficult. It's too, eco-anxiety is a thing, and if you're in your 20s, you've got a lot to lose. So if you can offer them, what Shaping Better Places does is, in a very sort of overt way, it offers a solution where they can fit these two worlds together now. This thing that kind of they had to just think about when they're at home, but not think about when they're at work. It's like, actually, there is something I can do. I can install some biototems in the next industrial development we do, or I can get John Little to come in and create a wonderful, excuse me, a wonderfully lumpy landscape with beautifully, planted and super biodiverse in how that would work. You stick these things together, John's stuff and our stuff together, and you're creating habitat for, the bees, little icons to point people to work in that place so they can go and see these things happening. Yeah. And it's not a giant leap. It's, it's just a case of trying to get away from the purely doing it from a tick box exercise. And as I say, that's what we use Shaping Better Places for, to try and make it as meaningful as we possibly can for as many people as we possibly can.
And I think this is going to lead on again. This is kind of these leading on to the next podcast, because the next podcast I'm recording is for a sort of community gardening horticultural project down in Bath. And again, that they're very much, it's the horticulture is the vehicle, to connect people in their community to biodiversity. It just seems I might have to change the name of this podcast to like the community, to the nature people and Blaze podcast. But
yeah, it's
somebody else. As I said, that somebody else has got that title, so I won't. No.
Yeah. No, it's so important, getting the word out, and not in a, not in this sort of. It's very easy to spread a terrifying message, because the reality is, 1.5 degrees looks really likely, 2 degrees looks pretty certain. The world is going to change, and what we need to do is be thinking about kind of resilience projects. I think, how are we going to design a place so that it has resilience built in for wildlife and for people? And that means not only the sort of physical manifestations of those things, but also the psychological side, so that young folks have had the opportunity to talk about these things and know what to expect. The science is very clear, and we work with scientists all the time, so we should all be taking note of what they're saying, and sort of disseminating that in a way that has, it's realistic, but it has some hope attached to it as well.
But as you said earlier, the art is the unlock. I remember looking at your eel tiles, and if I was looking at that, I was, you can see that somebody's taken care to do that. Do you know what I mean? There we go.
I've got one.
Oh, nice.
So these are this is the eel tile that you're talking about. So it's like, hundreds of these went down into a culvert where, from a stream under a road bridge, and there was a drop where the eels couldn't get into to carry on their journey upstream, and so our solution to that was to create a ridiculously decorative system of tiles that three-dimensional, so the eels can sort of wind their way through to get up and under the road and carry on their journey. And you can do it in a variety of ways. More often they're like these little plastic brushes, and the eels work their way through. But our thought again was, people can walk over this bridge, and if they look down and see 1,000 love hearts, it's like, oh, that's going to hold their attention for a minute. Now all it needs is a QR code or something, and they can find out about the extraordinary life cycle of the European eel. And we've used these are chocolate molds to make the love hearts, and then we use folded paper, the pleating. So this is a really old craft of pleating to create the chevron backgrounds. And this is a natural concrete, natural cement tile. And as you know, so it's interesting. You should pick that out, because I literally had one right next to me.
Well, that's the thing. I looked at that and I just, you know, we've said it. Sorry to repeat myself, but it's, you know, art is the unlock. You know, for somebody, you know, I think about this stuff all the time. You know, it's what I do for a job. It's what I think about. But again, it's that unlock of getting people connected. You know, art. You know, I mean, I don't need to tell you. Art is just the unlock, isn't it? It's just.
It is, because you know that, and it's very, very hands-on. You know, it's a transferable skill that you don't need £250,000 to buy a 3D printer to come up with something that has all the complexity of, you know, and you can teach this technique of pleating paper to children. You know, it looks complicated, but what you know, all of that stuff that I was saying earlier about complexity, you know, so many of the arts and crafts have that kind of designed in. And, you know, we quickly realized that this isn't origami, this is pleating. This is a really old, you know, this is how they used to pleat, well, still do in places, pleat fabric for fashion and whatnot. And you have two of these, they fit together exactly the same. You put your fabric in, the thing's squeezed together, it goes in a steamer, and then, of course they do some big sheets, and when it comes out. But we were just fascinated by the pattern, texture, and form that is created by you know, by paper. And if you then transfer that pattern to concrete, you've now created a very rich textured pattern that has these amazing drip lips and chevrons and shapes. These are just test pieces that we've done in the past. And you know, if you put this out on the side of your house in a shady spot or a sunny spot, wherever, depending on where you put it, it will do different things. But nearly always you'll see mosses or maybe lichens beginning to grow in these chevrons, and those are the first terraforming life forms that eventually lead to sustainable, without any need for hydroponics or any of that stuff, expensive systems.
Or green walls. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I don't like green walls at all. Sorry.
You don't like them.
No, not a fan at all.
No,
unless they're rooted. If they're rooted, or if the plants are naturally epiphytic, then, you know, fantastic. But green walls running on expensive systems that you know, they can look absolutely beautiful. I'm sure they have some biophilic, you know, use, but it strikes me that even if you plant one of those with you know, a very kind of diverse plant array, not just your pointless decorative ones, but you've instantly created a kind of threatened habitat, because somebody goes and the contract for renewal doesn't happen. Nobody turns that tap on, or the water thing doesn't work, the nutrients don't go in, the whole thing dies. You've created a vulnerable habitat right there. And I think that's a bit complacent personally. Whereas, I tell you, lockdown, however many months it was, that first lockdown was amazing, because the maintenance regime stopped everywhere. And we started to see nature coming back in places that we had never seen before. And I spent weeks on my, you know, hourly walk going round the town where I live and just documenting nature coming back, because there are so many clues to do with what we do, civil eco-engineering and artecology, about how to do this stuff in a sustainable way that doesn't require these expensive systems. And there were a couple of things really, and it's so simple. One was stop maintaining things, and stuff will grow. And the other is
like spraying the seawall. I forget where it was, but the seawall that used to be sprayed, and now you got where was it? Was it near you guys? There was a seawall that used to spray, and then they got there loads of that yellow vetch all over it.
Oh yes, yeah. So that's right. We've got, so that was, yeah, we're very lucky actually, because the Environment Agency own a strip of land, because I'm literally right by the sea. I can almost throw a pebble into the sea from the studio here, and the Environment Agency own a bit of the infrastructure here, and we managed to sort of persuade them to stop maintaining it, just as an experiment, to see if any of the habitat that was here once would come back. And sure enough, it did. It's this sort of dune slack habitat. After it started to spontaneously reappear, you know, in the cracks in the paving, and then the plants would build up and they'd hold more sand, and you get these little mini dunes. And then some of the wildlife associated with that stuff, little specialists, little dune specialists coming back as insects and all sorts of stuff. But with lockdown, you could see that happening in a very urban setting, in your town and your city. And it was absolutely fascinating. And it was just down to two things as far as I could see. One is the maintenance stops, so things had an opportunity to grow. And the other one was flow dynamics, the way air and water moves around on a surface. And that's a very, very good reason to start playing around with textures and patterns and forms. Because if you do that, the way air and water moves around on these things, instantly makes it habitable for something. And if you get once you get mosses on something, you're away. It's off, because it isn't very long before the rooted plants start coming along and making homes. I've seen full size plants growing out of drain. When you've got a house that's derelict or whatever, just go and have a look and see where things are growing and how, because it's no longer being maintained. It's extraordinary. So it's doable. All of this stuff is doable, sustainable, urban, biodiverse landscapes are completely possible, and we should just be doing more of it.
So one thing I wanted to, let's stick on that for a moment, because they are doable, but it's how we get this into, if I want to be really boring, how do we get it in, into specification packages? Because we talk about green walls, we talk about green roofs, where we didn't talk about green roofs, but green walls, you can go, okay, seen a blanket, job done, go to that company, they will give you a specification over email. That's done. I haven't got to think about that, move on. Green walls, go to X, Y, and Z supplier, they'll give you the spec package, put that, job done, isn't it? It's very quick. It's how we get, again, draw the comparisons, how do we, comparisons between you, your work and John's work, how do you get people to specify 150 mil of sand rather than topsoil to BS50, whatever it is? And it's how to streamline that process, so these products, these services are at the forefront, and not, they are included in specification packages.
I mean, that's the mountain to climb, isn't it? And I think that sort of, the way John is doing it, a lot of it is on his own land, but he has obviously done, he's got those amazing shelters and bike things and doors, and and they're just beautiful because they're functional and they really work. So every time a thing like that goes out, and he's putting it on his social media, and obviously we try and do the same, it's proving a point that it can be done. And I think that's really important. And the next step up is policy. How do we go about changing policy? Well, biodiversity net gain is playing into our hands already, in terms of what we might use that for. And as I say, it's not mandatory at the moment, but it will be next year. So that, what does that mean? It means that any development will have to return the land not just to what it was, but actually 10% better than it was before. That's quite a difficult thing to do. Now, obviously, there's going to the horror of that potentially is that there's going to be a lot of offsetting going on. When they can't do it, they'll be offsetting, and then you've got the danger for greenwash again. But we've got our eye on it, and I think as long as there are folks out there that have realistic solutions that that do work, then your organisation will necessarily rise to the top in terms of how you get chosen to do things. This is certainly the case.
So I guess sorry to interrupt, but I guess that you, like you say, you've got your eye on it, and you guys are going to be in a position where you can say, look. So I guess you're beginning to look at how your products work within that metric. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So the metric is there. I have to say we're not preoccupied with metrics at all. In that sense, because we're not trying to tick those target boxes. What we're kind of saying. We're the processes that we go through in order to design and make a thing. It means that it's inherently good for wildlife. We won't put anything out there unless we think it does that. So we know that it'll meet the biodiversity targets. And in fact, we also know that projects that we've been involved with, or that we are going to be involved with, a biodiversity net gain requirement of 20% has been put on it because they've written us into the scheme in the first place. So that's quite if you think about that, that's quite amazing, because that's a tiny organisation has driven the percentage net gain up because of what we do.
Yeah.
I think that's something that we might see happen more and more with other organisations. That they'll be driven by what's available, available to them, and the more that comes available, I think why wouldn't?
So Nigel, let's go back to that. You mentioned about biodiversity net gain at 20%. Do you want to just tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah. So I mean, that just a demonstration, really, I think, of how the aspiration for biodiversity net gain can be inspired by organisations or folks that are working on the subject, to try and boost biodiversity. So just locally, we've got a scheme on where we know. Well, we're pretty sure we're going to be written into the scheme. Certainly, the people behind it have been in contact with us, and they have set a biodiversity net gain requirement of 20% instead of the standard 10%, and that's just happened because they know what we do, and they can see that that is a possibility, and I'm sure that that won't happen everywhere for every place, but I think the more and more of us, more and more organisations there are out there that are coming up with these kinds of solutions that will boost biodiversity in any way, is likely to increase the aspiration to go higher with the net gain requirement. When it's written into a scheme.
So going back, so potentially that. Could some, perhaps this is what you're saying, perhaps some schemes could be rather than kind of strictly metric led, that it could be a supplier led or collaboration led.
If the products or the the skills, knowledge,
the overall package
aren't there, then how, then you've just got to scratch about for to do whatever you can. But if there are organisations, and there are, let's face it, they're coming through, now that are considering biodiversity in the way they go about doing their landscape businesses or their product making of products or whatever it is. If we see more and more of those, then I would have thought you could expect that the aspiration to do more biodiversity, higher percentage of biodiversity net gain might happen. I mean, there's always going to be tension between developers and the net gain agenda, and the tendency for expediency, you know, just to get these things done and so they can tick the box. It's always going to be there, I'm sure.
But I want to stop you there, because I do again, I do think you're right, but there's a developer down in London, Berkeley Homes, and again, you know, they're doing it to sell houses, but they are in their London schemes putting biodiversity net gain or biodiversity nature at the heart of their developments, again, because nature sells. I know that's, and then, you know, they're not you know, they're a business, I get that, but it's
you know, that's the hope, isn't it, Dan, that, you know, that will become part of their bottom line, you know, that it is purpose driven as well as profit driven. So yeah, I mean, perhaps I'm a little cynical, you know, just
no, I can agree. I do agree with you.
that we you know, that we have kind of moved in and had experience with, but you know, we're hopeful. We're a hopeful organisation, and you know, it's why we do what we do, because we think we've got something to give to that agenda and something that might push it on, you know. So yeah, no, I mean, I'd be interested to see that, you know, to have a look at that project and see what they're actually, you know, doing there, because, you know, if there are exemplar projects out there, then they need to be trumpeted, you know, people need to hear about them. And
but I do wonder, and this is coming back to sort of, you know, the 20% aspiration, that people don't know what they don't know. And perhaps if, again, this is, you know, going back to what you guys do, being purpose driven, that people don't know, decision makers don't know what they don't know. And you know, and if somebody puts to a scheme, you know, you can do a biodiverse roof, or you can have the nature bricks, or you can, you know, if you reroute the downpipes, you can save £250,000 on, you know, on hard infrastructure, and then you can create a bioswale and all that. You know, people don't know what they don't know. So
no, right, that's very true. Yeah, I mean, you know, there's the established ways of doing things that, you know, that are entrenched in the you know, the sort of the culture of how they go about doing things, and that makes it very very difficult to sort of create any kind of step change towards, you know. But there are and ESG is behind it, you know. There is, you know, we've certainly noticed a difference in the kind of the language that's being used in, you know, the way business is happening. But you know, what you kind of have to remember is that all of these companies, unless they're not for profits, are duty bound to their shareholders to make a profit. Above all else, that is what they are there to do, to make a profit. And that necessarily means that you know, they're not purpose driven. And so, you know, the danger of lip service is always there, of lip service to biodiversity and biodiversity net gain is always there. And that's just being realistic, I think. But, you know, again, let's be ready for it. You know, let's do what we can with the system that we've got. That's our attitude, you know. And if we can just crank it up a bit by making things that work, and you know, landscape schemes that really work, and connecting communities, and, you know, to the things that we do, and by doing that, folks are happier. And you know, if the social housing thing is quite interesting, because it's a different model. They own everything. The social housing organisations own everything, and they're going to stay owners of everything. And as such, you know, they want to retain their tenants. They want to keep them there. They want, you know, they don't want people sort of moving all the time. So there's a different, you know, that's quite a different way of going about developing. And therefore they tend to have a slightly, you know, different approach about this subject matter that we're talking about now. And so, you know, we do work with a few social housing developers. It's still, you know, very much money driven, but there is a difference, you know. I think is quite useful.
So for yourself and Artecology, what does the future hold? Are you looking for more? Again, we've talked about biodiversity net gain, but is it to widen your sort of research base? You're gonna, I mean, what does the kind of future hold?
Well, I mean, I mean, as I said, you know, we are a small organization. The limitation for us is always resources. It's always, I mean, you know, so that's money and people really. But that's not a gripe, because there's a double-edged sword, you know, I suppose, in a way. You've got there's the negative side of not having gigantic budgets to do things, but then the positive side of being really super flexible, you know, and being able to kind of just get on with stuff. So the future, I'm not certain, if I'm honest, what the future is. You know, we've hovered in the last 2 years. We've or 3 years probably, we've hovered between notions of going for investment and growing to be a bigger business.
Yeah.
We found that, if I'm honest, not really to our taste.
Yeah.
It changed the kind of the whole point of what we do in so many ways, because we would then have shareholders and we'd be legally bound by being, you know, profit rather than being a purpose business. So, and then we've considered being a not-for-profit. At the moment, we have a not-for-profit called the Common Space, which we use to do local projects, etc. But at the moment, we've just kept this limited company model, and we're sort of organically letting it do whatever it is it needs to do. And so what we're seeing is interest in Artecology growing, and that's coming from all sorts of places, from, you know, government policymakers, local government developers, you know, community organisations, etc. And so it feels like we're in an okay place at the moment. You know, there has been times when we're making no money at all, and we're kind of thinking, how are we going to survive this? At the moment, it's okay, because we've got projects coming through. We're working with Natural England. We've got commissions. You know, we're selling stuff. And
I'm curious to know how you got to work with Natural England. That was something I'd love to stick on.
Well, so we sort of knock about in the similar sort of places. We get invited to go and speak at seminars, and, you know, we hang out in similar places, I suppose. And because in 2019 the Isle of Wight became I think I've already said this, Dan, but in 2019 the Isle of Wight was designated a UNESCO World Biosphere Reserve, and that's a big deal for a small island. And there are only about 800 biosphere reserves in the world, so we're in really good company with some very exotic places. And there are very, very few whole island biosphere reserves, and so it's the Isle of Wight and all of its inshore waters are the biosphere reserve.
Yeah.
And what that means is that it's turned a kind of spotlight, national spotlight and international spotlight on this place. And therefore, any organisations that are working on biosphere principles, which Shaping Better Places basically is a kind of shortened version in a way, accidentally. I mean, it wasn't written, you know, because we were doing that before the biosphere designation happened. But there's a lot of shared principles about people, place and wildlife. And so we sort of stand out a little bit, you know. And then we're quite a fun organisation as well, and folks who have fairly stiff jobs love to come and visit. And so we get the Environment Agency folks come, and, you know, they come in their shorts and we give them an ice cream, and, you know, and they have a nice time, but talking about very serious stuff.
Yeah.
And, you know, say we're right by the beach. There's something about this place you know, we're on an old 1930s family golf course, which is still operational. It's been running for 90 years or whatever it is, and it's still as it is. The studio that I'm in now was the old ice cream factory, and and it's fantastic for hosting people. Couple that to the biosphere reserve thing, it means that we're getting universities visit us, we're getting all sorts of people working in interesting places coming to see us and then want to work with us, and we're very happy to do that. We want to remain cross-discipline in our approach and collaborative in the way we go forward. And that sort of, so far that we've managed to maintain that, and I say there's an element of fun and humor about this stuff. You can't help it when you're making things with your hands. It's sort of it's childlike in a way, our approach to this.
But I guess when people come to the studio, it's the inspiration as well. You're right. It's that childlike. It's a childlike.
Well, nobody
process.
A giant wooden tricycle hanging from the ceiling, which
Sorry,
we
come on. Let's now flip the camera around. I think it's probably a good. I don't think we can surpass this. So this will be the last thing we.
So there is a giant wooden tricycle, and that's made by one of our team. He's an inventor who makes things that don't really need to exist, but because they do the world's a better place. This thing did an extraordinary journey across Europe and Spain with our Dan Roberts on it, and it's really a kind of social capital machine. It goes like, that's the front end, that's the back end. It's made entirely from recycled materials, and it's a 2-seater. And he did an extraordinary journey, and it hangs on our ceiling, comes out for events. We do lots of free events. Dan, we've got a big one coming up, an art science event called Hullabaloo in October, which we might get about 20,000 people visit over the course of a weekend, and we invite all sorts of exhibitors, and it's kind of mad, and it's really fun, and it's housed here where we are. And again, it's another reason that I think organizations are interested in us, because we're not normal. We're just not normal.
What's the date again? Sorry, what's the date again?
The 15th and the 16th. There's a special event on the evening of the 14th, I think. And we collaborate with an organisation called Shade Makers. They're one of these big. They're based on the Isle of Wight, and they're in fact, they did for the Queen's pageant. They did some of the carnival stuff back in the Platinum Jubilee thing. And we work with them to put on this event every year. And this year is the first year it's gone back to full scale. It's normally in May, but we were all so busy, we had to do it in October this year. It's got its own website, Hullabaloo, iw.com, I think it is. And, we've had the British Science Museum come, the Natural History Museum come and do stuff. In the past, we get, the Environment Agency are coming, to exhibit, and so are Natural England and Project Seagrass, which we're part of all that stuff. They'll be there. There'll be makers and all sorts of things all jumbled together, and some interesting events as well. And so we do that through the Common Space, which is our not-for-profit. And we punctuate our season with free events. That's the other thing. It's a big festival, but it's entirely free. So it's completely democratic. Anybody can come, and it's aimed at families, etc. And you can come find out about Artecology, and we've got microscopes and, stuff that people to see nature in different ways and all that kind of thing. And so, in answer to your earlier question, I think that is why we find it easy to make connections with these policy makers, and because we've got a very I suppose it comes from our artistic background and all of that time working in communities, and we know what works and how to engage, and that is often a missing thing from these very stiff organisations. They know they've got to do it because people are telling them from on high, you need to be doing public engagement, you need to be, and they come here and they see the kind of fun side of what's going on here, and we're dealing with probably the most important issue of our time, biodiversity loss. You know, climate change is obviously a driver of that, and it's a longer, slower burn, but biodiversity loss will get us way before climate change does. And so that odd combination of creativity and fun and then very, very serious work, I don't think there's anyone. I mean, there are only a handful of organisations working in this sort of field anyway, the eco-engineering stuff around the world, and I don't think there's anyone that takes quite the same approach. But none of this is by design, Dan. It's just happened. It's just because it's a sequence of events that led us here, you know.
Yeah, but isn't that the best way though? Like, you can have every business plan in the world, but there is part of I don't know, there's part of going with your gut, intuition, and what feels right. I mean,
it's authentic, you know, and people can sense that, can't they? Do you know what I mean? It's like, if it's contrived, you know, it kind of has that look to it. But I think, you know, Artecology and ARC and the Common Space are authentic organisations, and the people in there really mean it. You know, we really sort of, and we live by what we do and what we say. So yeah, no, and so you know, if you happen to be around the Isle of Wight, come over, Dan, come and see us. You know, well, around Hullabaloo or not, you know, whatever you like, you're very welcome.
Well, I bet you must get annoyed with all the. Is Bestival still going? That's the only time I've ever been to the Isle of Wight.
Festival's moved on now, unfortunately, because it was a great festival. But we have the Isle of Wight Festival still, which is a big one, and then we've got a really lovely small one called Rhythm Tree, which has about 5,000 people, and it's sort of world music, and it's brilliant. And we usually do something there as well. So yeah, the island's just a really interesting, great place, and literally. So I throw a pebble that way, it goes into the sea. Throw a pebble that way, got white-tailed eagles.
Oh,
unbelievable! Yeah, I mean, it's nuts. It's just nuts.
Have they been?
Yeah, got a reintroduction program going on at the moment. Yeah, so we're in. I think so. This year we missed the year of release because of bird flu, but I think so. Next year will be the third year, and we've got a 5-year program. But we've already got a bonded pair, and they're literally just that way.
Oh wow! Well, that's me sold. I'm getting on the first hovercat over.
Yeah, and hopefully beavers soon as well. We've got beavers on the way. So,
because when you said the white-tail eagle, I was thinking about they were planning to do the reintroduction near me. I'm in Cambridge, but on Wild Ken Hill Estate.
Yeah,
Norfolk coast, and then like you say, the bird flu got them or stopped them being reintroduced.
Yeah. Well, it's working here, you know, and you know, the birds in their first year go all over the place, even, you know, as far as Europe, and then they sort of head back. But we've got there's 2 bonded pairs now. One is on the island, the other's in Sussex, and the program continues. But it literally takes your breath away. I mean, these are like the 3rd biggest eagles in the world, and they're living here on the Isle of Wight. The novelty's never going to wear off. I mean, honestly, they look like aircraft. They're so big, they're massive.
Yeah, we get excited with red kites. So I don't know. I don't know what we're going to be like.
We're jealous of your red kites because we haven't got any on it. They get the occasional one drift over, but so far they haven't arrived yet. But we're waiting because I love red kites. They're just such amazing, strange, sort of lazy, lolloping birds of prey.
Nigel, on that note, I think thank you very much for doing the podcast. It's been a really good chat, and top man. Speak to you soon.
Thank you.
Excellent. See you.